Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the St. Therese Mental Health Ministry in association with Catholic Charities Information Night. So I'm glad you're here. Tonight's topic, as you may know, is accompanying those who mourn, grief support, and mental health ministry. And just for grins, I'd like to know how you found out about this. So by a raise of hands, tell me those who found out about it from the parish bulletin. Raise your hands. Awesome. And Diane, do a quick count. Yeah. yeah. Do a quick count. And then the next thing is going to be from the Catholic Charities. Okay, raise your hands once again. Sorry. All right. And then tell me, please, if you found out by way of it, the Catholic Charities website information. Okay, great. There was 3. I saw 3. And then who found out about it just word of mouth? Awesome. So I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I see 8. So thank you. Again, as we grow our mental health ministry here I worked at North Kansas City Hospital, so you may hear me say that sometime, not by intention, but anyway, humility, that's what it is. But our mental health ministry here at St. Therese, we continue to reach out, to people of all kinds, of all topics, and tonight we welcome Deacon Ed Schoner. He was ordained a permanent deacon in 2004 and serves at St. Peter's Cathedral in the Diocese of Scranton. He's president of the Diocese of Scranton. He's the founding member of the Association of Catholic Mental Health Ministers and the Catholic Institute of Mental Health Ministry at the University of San Diego. He serves on the Council on Mental Illness of the National Catholic Partnership on Disability. Deacon Schoner also, alongside with Bishop John Dolan, is co-author of the books Responding to Suicide, a Pastoral Handbook for Catholic Leaders, and When a Loved One Dies by Suicide. And if you like, we have some of those books over on this corner table from the Ave Maria Press. Rachel, if you want to pass them around, you can, super duper. Along with family and friends, founded the Katie Foundation after his daughter, Kathleen, died by suicide in 2016. Katie's obituary went viral because it spoke to the needs and concerns of people who live with mental illness. He lives with his family in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and tonight we welcome Deacon Ed.
Thank you all. I assume that mic is working fine? Yes? Yeah, everybody can hear me good? Okay. Yeah, we were putzing around with the sound ahead of time, so you never know how this is going to work. So, good evening. I'm Deacon Ed Schoner. I'm from the Diocese of Scranton, Pennsylvania. And for those of you that are Office fans, Scranton is a real place, and I'm from there. So, people always it's interesting how that show is going through about its 3rd reincarnation, and younger people in particular, are always amazed to know that Scranton's a real place. But I'm also the president of a group called the Association of Catholic Mental Health Ministers, and it's a brand new association within the life of the church. We just started 4 or 5 years ago. I'm absolutely convinced, as I'll say a number of times throughout the evening, that Christ and the Holy Spirit's moving in this ministry. It might have been a ministry that wouldn't have been possible 15 or 20 years ago because of all the stigma associated with mental health and our unwillingness to openly talk about it and help each other. In some ways, there's nothing new about mental health ministry. It's been around forever. Christ, now that I look at scriptures through the lens of mental health, I can see Christ addressing the mental health needs of the people of his time in their own way, using the language of the time. And so in one way, there's nothing new, but what is new is that we're organizing, and the good folks here in your parish are also involved in this, organizing a ministry in a very deliberate way to address these issues of mental health and spiritual well-being. And I'll get into this in more detail. It's all about spiritual support, not clinical or psychiatric support, but it's spiritual support within the church. And we've grown from just a couple of us, literally just maybe 10 of us was back 4 years ago to now we have over 2,000 members. We're in about 40 countries now, and you can really see it growing. And there's many more people involved with the ministry than are members of our association. And then, as crazy as it sounds, to me at least, this whole thing is crazy. But I met with the Pope last month. You know, that was pretty wild and interesting, and I'll tell you about that later. But it's an important thing that we're doing, that you all are doing here. So it's good that you're out to want to talk about it. Now, yes, okay, sound thing. The other mic? Okay. A little problem with this one? Okay. Gotta love tech. No problem. At least it's working. Sometimes. That works better? Okay. That was much louder. Okay. So I'd like to start with a prayer to St. Dipna. I know you have the prayer cards on the table here. Not that you get one on the way out. We don't have to wait to have everybody get a prayer card right now. But do you know, how many of you have you heard of St. Dipna? Do you know who St. Dipna is? Okay, yeah, many people do. It's interesting. Every bishop I meet says they hear about St. Dipna a lot more often because a lot of young girls are taking St. Dipna as their confirmation name. St. Dipna is the patroness for people that live with mental illness, and she's been the patroness for about 1,500 years now. She goes, well, maybe not quite that long, back to the 7th century. And her story's clouded in the midst of history and hagiography. So what we can say about her story is a little bit unclear. But what is clear about St. Dipna is the town where she was martyred in, Geel, Belgium, became the place in Northern Europe where people who live with mental illnesses were welcomed and supported. Their shops and the fields opened. The people in that town just opened their arms. And if you had someone in Northern Europe and 1,000 years ago, that's where you'd want, that'd be the best care. That's where you would want to send your loved one, would be to the town of Geel, Belgium. So the real miracle associated with Dipna is her story's interesting, but more importantly, the legacy of over 1,000 years of caring for people with mental health challenges and opening up your community to support them without stigma or discrimination and just welcoming or loving them. So she's a good patron for this ministry. So we'll start with this prayer to St. Dipna. So Father, Son, Holy Spirit, Lord, we pray for those who have a mental illness. Help us understand that the way we talk about people with a mental illness affects the people themselves and how we treat the illness. So often, people who have a mental illness are known as their illness. People say that she is bipolar or he is schizophrenic. Help us not use that phrase. People who have cancer are not cancer. Those with heart disease are not heart disease. Let us always remember that people with a mental illness are not the illness. They are beautiful creations of God. There is so much fear, ignorance, and hurtful attitudes that the people who suffer from mental illness needlessly suffer further. Our society needs to provide resources to understand and treat mental illness. Help us support and be compassionate to those with a mental illness every bit as much as we support those who suffer from any other illness. Grant courage to those for whom we pray and fill them with hope. Help them to remember you love them. They are never alone. Saint Dipna, patron of those with a mental illness, pray for us. So why are we here? I won't give you a whole bunch of statistics, but I will give you this one statistic that, 1 in 5 of us here, and I'm sure this applies here tonight in every parish community, currently live with some sort of diagnosable mental health condition. That would range from the common cold of mental illness, anxiety, and depression, to the more serious illnesses like schizophrenia or serious mood disorders like bipolar disorder. In the course of our lifetime, about half of us will experience something like that. So if you're not living with a mental health challenge yourself, you know and love someone that is. And the other thing to remember too is just like physical illness, it's not an on-off switch. It's a continuum. You can from very good mental health to be very severely ill with a mental health, and you can be somewhere in that range throughout the courses of our lifetime. And it's important for us to not only be compassionate to other people other than us that live with mental illnesses, we need to be compassionate to ourselves and recognize when we're dealing with a mental health challenge or mental illness. I know for a lot of years I didn't do that. I did not want to admit to myself that I live with depression. And I'll tell you, the only person besides myself that paid for that, the person that really paid for that was my wife, is that not only did I not want to get out of bed and do chores around the house and that sort of stuff, but the flip side of depression is that you get angry and grumpy and miserable. And, Ruth, my wife, paid for me on those days when it's like that. And depression, I wish I could pray it away. It doesn't work that way. Depression comes in like a fog. Any of you have depression, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It comes like a fog, and then it leaves like the fog. It has its kind of a mind of its own, so to speak. Prayer and spiritual practices help to get through the periods of depression, but it doesn't make it go away. Similar with anxiety or any of the rest of these illnesses. They are illnesses. I'm not talking about temporary or sadness or temporary anxiety that maybe comes with a test or with something bad that might happen in your life. I'm talking about illnesses that stick with you, for long periods of time, for many years. Maybe not in my case with moderate depression, it's not every day, but it is regular throughout my life. And so one of the things is, not only is there stigma against people with the illness, but we don't take care of ourselves the way we should. About half of us that have a mental health challenge, 40% of us don't go get the treatment that we need to get because we don't want to admit to ourselves that we got to deal with something. So a large part of this is helping us get past that, because God doesn't want us to live that way. This is spiritual, and God wants us to live good, healthy lives. So we need to talk about our mental health conditions. That's a large part of what this ministry is simply talking about it with each other and being willing to bring it out into the community and support other people. Our church is a gift from God, and God works through all of us. We're all broken human beings. Lord knows I'm as broken as anyone. I don't know about you, but I haven't heard a big booming voice from God about fixing mental health challenges. What I have seen is God working through His church, through His ministers, through the people in His church to help each other. And we can do that by being willing to share our stories with each other. So besides my story about depression, my significant story is about my daughter, Katie, who was mentioned she died by suicide in August 2016, and she lived with bipolar 1 disorder for many years. And I'll tell you, our medical school in Scranton put together a short little film, about 4 minutes or so, with Katie's story and talking about how we can better address mental health in the community. And I'll show this film because I'm so thankful they did it, because I go around giving these talks, and it's so good that I can turn a film on rather than me having to tell you all about Katie, because even though it's been 8 years, it can still get emotional and that sort of thing. And I always say, if I start tearing up or getting a little watery-eyed and you're uncomfortable watching a 60-some-year-old guy get like that, all I can say to you is, just deal with it, okay? Because I don't make any excuses for it when it does happen. But let me show you this story about Katie, and then we can talk more. And I think I have to put the mic down next to the. Katie growing up was a beautiful, wonderful, vibrant little girl almost from the get-go. She was born in Halloween, so Halloween in our house here was always a big day. She was just a wonderful, sweet girl, the best kid you could hope to want to raise. Scranton High School is where she went. She was the salutatorian at Scranton High School. She was the freshman sensation on her soccer team, president of her National Honor Society. She was dating boys, and it was a wonderful time in her life, at least all outward appearances. Katie first experience with the mental illness probably started before we as parents knew. This mental illness was causing all sorts of anxieties for her, and she was cutting on her arm, and she would cover it with her bracelets. This is when she was a senior in high school. We didn't know what to make of it because we had no experience in mental illness. The response when she came back to high school was just this silence. I don't think anybody was deliberately being mean or setting us aside. It's just that our friends and family and other people at the school don't know what to say.
It took us a long time to begin to understand what this mental illness is, what bipolar disorder is. We had never heard of it. She always took her medicine. She always took it seriously. It was a lot of hit or miss with these medicines, but she stuck in there for a long time. But finally, at the end, the last year, nothing was working. They were just throwing the medicine cabinet at her. She just became so terribly, painfully depressed, and she tried to pull herself out of it. The depression just overwhelmed her. She died from suicide in August 3rd, 2016. So I thought it would be good just to simply say this is what happened. She had a mental illness and she died from suicide. But to recognize it as an illness, not as a character flaw or a moral failing or anything like that. It apparently spoke to what a lot of people with mental illness experience, and this obituary went viral.
This is a unique medical school because no other medical school has made behavioral health in collaboration with its community its #1 priority.
The Behavioral Health Initiative is a wonderful initiative that we at the Katie Foundation have been supporting because it brings the treatment of mental illness into the community.
If you think about many of these issues and problems as being brain disorders, biologically based, strong genetic factors, then that's going to help remove the stigma that's been associated with having behavioral health problems, psychiatric problems.
There's so many misconceptions about people that have a mental illness. Mental illness is an illness like all the other illnesses that doctors treat, and it needs to be understood that way.
The goals of the curriculum would be provide the tools and the awareness and the expertise to help integrate behavioral health into the physical healthcare world so that it is seamless and it is just a matter of fact that those two problems will be addressed together.
And that's what I like about the BHI. It'll be integrating the care of people with a mental illness into the broader community in many, many different ways, and it's a great thing.
So that's it's wonderful what the medical school is doing, and there is being progress in integrating mental health care into physical health care. I know when I go now for an annual my checkup, if my physician doesn't ask me about my mental health, I chastise them a little bit and say, how come you didn't ask me about how my mental health is doing? I think in general that's improving quite a bit. But part of I think this is a good way to think about spiritual care for mental health within the church. Just as important we integrate it into our communities, into our overall physical health care, we also can do the same thing and integrate it into the spiritual care that we offer each other. That mental health ministry, mental health care of the spiritual lives of those of us who suffer with this and our families become an integral part of what the church does. These were just some of the things, like I said, like in the video, that Katie's obituary went viral. Neither Katie or I are any kind of celebrity, so it obviously hit at the right time, struck the right chord. But these are just some of the things we heard about it. It's as serious as any physical illness, and to look at it that way, never understood why people with a mental illness are treated any differently than someone with a physical illness, but sadly that is a reality. And I hope this is true, that God's using it for a good divine purpose. God can overcome anything, and even the evil of suicide, as we all know from Romans. And don't be quick to judge because it can happen to you or anyone else. And you know, the one story I always mention is with the authors of the books that we worked on, Bishop John Dolan and I. Bishop Dolan's now the Bishop of Phoenix. I got to know him when he's the auxiliary in San Diego, and just when you think you got it bad, you know the old saying, somebody else has it worse. And Bishop Dolan has lost 3 siblings to suicide and a brother-in-law, and his parents are still alive. God bless his parents that have had to go through that. But you know, makes no difference. You're a bishop, you know, you're a deacon, you're a priest, lay people in the community, you know, it touches us all. Socioeconomic doesn't make any difference. Mental illness and mental health challenges cuts across all categories. So So I would ask you to share what your story is. Maybe not now. I mean, if one or two of you want to, that'd be fine. But to think about what your story is, particularly as you decide to get into this ministry, to be able to share your story and to use it for the good. Because, this is not the end. Whatever suffering you're going through with mental health challenges is not the end. God can overcome that and use it to the good in some way. I know in my case, certainly I've become much more empathetic, much more humble, much more closer to God, and I can use that to help other people that are struggling like this. So I would hope that some of you can think about what your story is, and if you want to share it briefly, do you put your hand up? Do you want to say something?
My story is not unique, but many of us. My story is not unique, but many of us have the same thing. Mine started out with not being able to sleep a normal night. So I went for sleep testing, and I was diagnosed as clinically depressed. And how they got that out of me not sleeping well, that was the case. And so I didn't do anything with it because I denied it. I thought, I can't be clinically depressed. I don't have long-term bouts. But I didn't realize it was the beginning stage. What ensued was experienced bankruptcy. Along with that, declining health at a rapid pace. I had hip replacement. All of that weighed on. And I got to the point where I got to my lowest point where I was considering suicide because I didn't want to deal with it anymore. And I stopped. And I thought there's more to live than just this. So I was treated at the psychiatric hospital for a while for depression. And like we talked about earlier, it's not going to go away. I have good days and bad days. But the thing that helps me a lot is coming to Mass, reading the scripture, the rosary, because there's so much to offer than just sitting there and delving into it. I realized the symptoms, but to help me through that, that's what helps me through that. And it's amazing because God worked through my sister. I have a close relationship with my sister, and she keeps telling me that you need to keep doing these positive things. And that's where I'm at today.
Thanks for sharing that with your community here. Yeah, and that spiritual life does make a difference. Like you said, it doesn't make your depression go away, but it helps you to keep going and give you purpose and meaning in life, and that's so important. And I'm sure many of you might have similar stories, or certainly know people that have stories like that our spiritual life does make a difference. So think about what your story is, and maybe, like you just did briefly, use it to the good to help other people. So in our ministry, we found that mental health in the parish, and asked the question, are people comfortable and willing to talk in their parish community about mental health and their grief to a certain extent, but certainly their mental health. And there's three main concerns we found we have to pay attention to. Is one, there's doubts whether those of us in clergy and church leaders understand the experience, because they so seldom hear us talk about it ourselves. And I don't know about you, Father, I know when I was being formed as a deacon, I got next to nothing in far of mental health, and I don't think I heard the word suicide all through my formation. The seminaries are starting to change a little bit, but there's still, we don't have a lot of, as clergy at least, a lot of formation in this. Some members of the clergy do go get degrees in psychology and really specialize in it, but I mean, as a general rule, we don't get a lot. The second worry is that the fear that the church and the parish community will judge them, that people will think they're different, that they're lesser than because they have a mental illness. And we can get into it a little bit on suicide, that there was a teaching on suicide at one time that was pretty harsh, and we can talk about that a little bit when we talk about grief more. And then the third concern is the lack of support. Is there some place in the parish community where they can go for support? And of course, the Father's always there, but there's a mental health ministry in parish communities such as yours where they can find the support. I'll be honest with you, when Katie first came down with bipolar disorder in her first suicide attempt when she was 19,
the church, there wasn't really much there in offer in the church to help me. There wasn't any real understanding. So my wife and I just sort of had to deal with it on our own, which is a shame and difficult. And I know it's not just me. I know a lot of other people that had a similar circumstance where you think you're all alone, nobody understands. I don't want to tell my people in the parish about this because they'll think particularly my wife takes it hard. They'll think I'm a bad mother because my kid got a mental illness. And there's that sort of stuff that was just out there. Hopefully that's changing and we're more open and loving communities, but I know there's still a good amount of that out there, and particularly in some areas. So those are the three things we try to do. So one of the things we have to be careful about when we're getting in mental health ministry in general is be careful with our words. And remember, try not to say anything with a mental illness. Try not to say anything to someone with a mental illness that you wouldn't say to a person with a physical illness. And this little film clip here, in a kind of a snarky little way, drives that point home. It shows this young boy here who is dealing with these issues, and I think it's just a funny little way to show the difference between the things that people say to this young man with his physical illnesses, or what people say to people with mental illnesses, and it sounds really stupid when they say it to you with a physical illness. So let me show you here.
And I was like, yeah, right, man. Oh, my head.
Please don't complain. It'll ruin the vibe.
Just.
It's like you're not even trying to walk.
Have you ever tried not having diarrhea?
God, my migraine is killing me.
You take meds for that?
Oh my God, dude! I cut myself and it looks really, really bad.
Some people have it way worse than you do. You gotta chill out.
So I guess you're not going out with us tonight. Again. You're such a flake.
Oh man, I really think I sprained it this time. I gotta go see my physical therapist.
You go to therapy?
Yeah?
Whatever, weirdo.
Can you hold on 1 second?
Honestly, your attitude sucks.
Ugh.
You taking another insulin shot?
Yeah, I kinda have to.
Have you ever thought about dropping the pharmaceuticals and fighting this the natural way?
My diabetes.
Enough is enough. It's a beautiful day, man. It's time to get up.
Dude, I just got eye surgery.
Yeah, like a week ago.
Well, it still hurts.
Ooh, I think your friend hurt himself.
I need help.
Nah, he's fine.
So I think that makes the point that in kind of a funny way about being careful with words, and don't say anything to someone with a mental illness that you wouldn't say to someone with a physical illness. If you, this is from another little slightly snarky slide, and you can Google this up if you want, the 10 things you should never say to a Catholic with mental illness. So I don't have all 10 things up here, but I have I think some of the more relevant ones is that one of the worst things you can do is trivialize it, a mental illness, by saying, giving some sort of prayer to a saint, or saying something as, just giving it up to God. I wish I could say it gets better with prayer. It doesn't. The depression still comes. It helps, but it doesn't get better. And giving it up to God, it's not that easy. I certainly ask God to be with me in the midst of the struggles, and I'm sure other people with mental illnesses do also, but just giving it up doesn't make it go away and give it up into the clouds. Mental illness is real and serious as any physical illness, and the truth is mental illness can't be understood or dealt with in terms of pious-sounding Catholic Christianese phrases or short, sweet quotes from the saints. Although I will say this, many saints dealt with mental illness themselves, and I can get into that, and many of these saints, it's no impediment to holiness. In fact, I'll get back to what we're doing this month. So if you really want to help a mentally ill person, get to know them, and if necessary, help them seek help. Listen to them, pray with them, empathize with them, and let them know you'll support them with your prayers. Kind of not much different than what you do in many other ministries. Were you stretching, or do you have something to say? Right. Yeah, what he said is it's important to listen and build a trust, and that's exactly true.
So the best thing I found so far in the way of some sort of church document on mental health and mental illness is this document from the California Conference of Bishops. It's called Hope and Healing. You can get it, you can download it easily. It's just a 9-10 page document, very pastoral, not a lot of deep theology. It's easy to read is what I'm trying to say. And what the bishops of California say is that taking care of the mental health and well-being of people is not something like a mental health ministry is not something you do on the side as some sort of niche specialized thing, but that it is an essential part of the pastoral care of the ministry. It's something central to who we are, our mental health central to who we are, and it's certainly central to what the church does. And they outline a couple basic principles which I use. And I think this is the most important principle, which is Christ calls us to attend to those who suffer, to provide hope and healing. We don't heal the illness, we provide spiritual healing, we provide hope in the midst of this. And we're not called to be a community of psychiatrists. I'm not a mental health professional. Most people involved in this ministry are not. We're called to be a community of persistent, patient love. That's what we're called to be, persistent and patient, because it does require a lot of persistence and patience and love through the love of Christ, willing the best for the other. And the primary task is to love and heal, spiritually heal, without demanding a cure. So if someone wants to come into the back of your church, and many people have trouble sitting because of their anxiety disorders, if they need to get up and walk around a little bit, as long as they're not walking onto the altar, and that's okay, that's fine. I work in the Center City Parish in Scranton. We have a lot of people, not a lot, but we have many people who live on the street and have very severe illnesses, very sick. But they find comfort coming into the church. Maybe their hygiene's not what it should be, but that's okay. They're welcome into the church. So don't demand a cure. Encourage people to go see mental health professionals, encourage people to get the help that they can find, but there's no demand for it. And this last thing, it's good to say that you exist. You can't say that too often, particularly with depression and other mental illnesses, because like you were saying earlier, I mean, suicidal thoughts are widespread throughout the community, much more than I think most of us realize. So you can't say too often that it's good that you exist, because people, particularly with depression, these mental health disorders, wonder if not we think it's good that they exist. And they'll even in their mind will question whether or not it's good that they exist. And because these illnesses, don't just disrupt the relationship with each other, it disrupts our relationship with God. We get a distorted understanding of our relationship with God, and sometimes we'll arrive at the right place again, realizing that it is good that we exist, but oftentimes we need someone to tell us that, like your sister, to tell you that it's good that you exist. So as part of this ministry, you can't say that too often in this ministry to people that live with these challenges. So I just repeat this over and over again, that this is ministry, not mental health treatment. We need to work together, professionals and ministers, but it's two different things. We're mind, body, and spirit. So our doctors do a pretty good job at taking care of our bodies. There's been, everyone knows what incredible advances in physical health care treatment. Mental health care, it's good. I mean, it's certainly a heck of a lot better. I can't imagine what it was like 200 years ago living with a mental illness, but it still has a long ways to go. But it's still better than nothing. I always view with Katie, for example, her medicines kept her alive a lot longer. We had 10 more years with her than we would have had otherwise. And it's sort of like chemotherapy. Not all chemotherapy cures cancer, but it can keep people alive longer than they would have otherwise. So I always tell people, talk to your doctors, follow what the doctor's orders. If things aren't working, let the doctor know and try to get adjustments. But what we haven't done a great job on, and we need to do a better job, is taking care of the spiritual lives of those of us that live with mental illnesses. It just hasn't been focused and addressed in a very specific way. So mental health treatment provides diagnosis, therapy, and medication, and it's science-based, and the idea is to try to reduce the symptoms. The word cure is not a word that you can really use very often. You hear every once in a while the illness going away, but for the most part, it's a chronic condition you live with for your entire life. What we do in ministry, to use a favorite word from Pope Francis, is accompany. We offer accompaniment, spiritual and social support. Prayers are important, but also having social support, maybe spiritual support groups for grief and other types of mental illnesses, and it's faith-based. And we provide spiritual hope and healing. So the mental health professionals sort of take away the symptoms. We try to infuse the love of God and the love of His church into the lives of people who live with a mental illness. So this is very important, and to understand the differences and don't cross the boundaries. We shouldn't try to diagnose or treat someone, and I would say alternatively, the mental health treatment needs to recognize and respect the spiritual lives. And I know the diocese has, looking at the people from the diocese, has a list of therapists and counselors, particularly Catholic Charities, that are available both to the parish community and to people in general. Because a lot of people wonder whether or not the therapists and the counselors are truly Catholic and will respect their faith. And so you've vetted these counselors and therapists to a certain extent, and so that you can get a list of people that you can rely on. So that's a wonderful thing that the diocese does, that be able to provide that sort of help. Yeah. Accompaniment, yeah, I mean, that's what I was just talking about. A key part of this ministry is to do just that, to give out referrals and information. Because those of you that have interfaced with the mental health care system, you know how complicated it is, and how broken it is, and how disjointed it is. Anybody, I see a couple of you shaking your heads. And then what's really crazy about the mental health system is they expect people with a mental illness to figure this out. So it is really hard. I know as a deacon, I spend a fair amount of time helping people, street people that are severely mentally ill. You know how hard it is to get a birth certificate if you lost a birth certificate? It is difficult. If you don't have a computer, you don't have a credit card, if you don't have, ways to deal with this, someone on the street, it's impossible. They can't get the birth certificate, and they can't even get started in the system. So, helping people to get into the system from, someone somebody living on the street without the birth certificate, but even someone with an upper middle class or wealthy family, it's still hard to figure out what's going on. Who do you go to? Where do you go? It's a complicated system. It still needs a lot of work. It's not as easy as like going to your GP and saying I got some physical problem and then off you go to all the specialists. It's not that simple. It's not that, unfortunately. It's not quite there yet. So that's an important thing. We do two different things, but we try to work together. And I'll show you the Pope's video later, but Pope Francis has said, along with indispensable psychological counseling, Jesus' words help. So we certainly recognize the fact that we need psychological counseling and that we need Jesus' words. And Pope Francis himself struggles with mental illness. He talks openly about dealing with anxiety. When he was running the Jesuits in Argentina back in the 70s, there was a dictator running the country. His priests were under attack. He had to do all sorts of things to smuggle them out of danger zones and protect them, and it was affecting his anxiety. And he went to see a psychiatrist. He still talks about this. Went to see a psychiatrist at the time, and the psychiatrist he went to see the psychiatrist as a woman for a few months, and she gave him all sorts of different ways to manage his anxiety. And he still does that to this day. For example, if you ever notice, he never really goes on a vacation. And he's talked about how, because of his anxiety, he's more comfortable staying where he's at and just sort of closing the door, turning the phone off, and just listening to his music and reading books where he's at, rather than traveling here, there, and everywhere, because that makes him anxious. And in a nice way, Pope Francis's folksy way of talking, he said he learned that you have to caress your mental health, your mental illness. You have to caress it. It's going to be with you for your entire life, so you might as well treat it gently and kindly and caress it and try to manage it as best you can. And I think that's a good way to express it. You have to, as an American business person, I'd say you got to manage it, or use some sort of more technical term, but Pope Francis says you got to learn to caress it. So that's I like that phrase, caress it. So mental health ministry, it's parish-based. We must meet where they are, which is in our parishes, and we have to get out of our zone of comfort and familiarity. It's a new ministry. We might not be comfortable with this. We may not have the confidence to do this. We might want to do it, but we wonder, well, can I do this? I don't have a degree in therapy or counseling. Can I do this? And I always say you only need two things to do this ministry well. One, you need a burning love of Jesus Christ, which I think you all have. And the second is that you have a passion or desire to help people with mental health challenges, which I suspect you all have. So if you got those two things, you can be a great mental health minister. And we can help you in the association and other places to build up the confidence to do that. You don't have to be a counselor or therapist, but you just have to be competent and have a certain level of literacy to be able to do that. So I'll spend some time here explaining what some of the things are that we have that we can help you to build up this confidence. We've done a bunch of training programs. They're all available on our website for free. We don't charge any money for this. And we have one basic program on how to start a mental health ministry. And I'll show you the trailer from that course. And it's a course that's designed for people like us, old people who haven't been in school for a long time. It's not academically rigorous. It's simple. You don't need to be a high-end computer tech. If you watch your students, your children or grandchildren who are in college taking their online courses, you can see it's pretty complicated to get online and do all of it. Our system is pretty simple. You don't have to have all of that. So let me show you the trailer for the one course on Introduction to Mental Health Ministry, and you can get a feel for what the course is like and the quality of it, and hopefully some of you would want to sign up and take it.
I went to the diocese and I said, have an idea, and the person who was vetting me, she said, oh, this sounds like mental health ministry. Nobody ever told me how much God loves people with mental illness, how much the church cares for people with mental illness.
As priests, we are starting to get a better understanding of the difference between someone who's suffering from mental distress as opposed to something more spiritual.
The statistics are there and they don't lie. So many people are affected by mental illness.
We're dealing a lot with different cultures that have taught people not to seek any help for their problems, to think that this is just a cross that God wants them to carry.
If mental health issues are left alone without addressing it, nobody can enjoy abundant life.
We're not the healers. God is the ultimate healer. We're there to help connect folks with resources. This is a ministry of presence. Just be present with that individual.
For many people, mental illness represents an ongoing and lifelong burden. We clearly proclaim that there is no shame in receiving a diagnosis of a psychiatric disorder, and we affirm the need for education in our communities to remove the unjust prejudice and stigma often associated with mental illness. We have the duty as Christians to reach out to the sick, to accompany them, and to do all we can to heal or diminish their suffering. As the body of Christ, we are called to help alleviate the burdens that stem from mental afflictions.
Introduction to Mental Health Ministry is a course for any Catholic who wants to bring mental health ministry to their parish or diocese. You'll learn how to increase mental health literacy, conduct a needs assessment, draw up a parish plan, and partner with other organizations in the community. You'll also hear the stories of clergy and laity who are already offering mental health ministry, and be inspired by the teachings of our Catholic faith.
I can think of a lot of people who never talked about their mental illness at church. Now they're not afraid to talk about their mental illness with one another and know that they're not alone.
We want to get rid of that stigma so people know that they can come to church, that they're not going to be judged, that they are accepted, that they are a child of God.
So that's a good course. I would encourage any of you to take it. Like I said, it's for free. It's online. It's at our webpage. So please go take a look. And people ask, me what's a mental health? What would ministry would consist of? So I developed this list of 10 things, top 10 list sort of what a robust ministry would be. You don't have to do everything. You maybe only do a couple of these things. But this is an idea to think about how you might want to do a ministry. Form a team, which you have here. It's not a go-it-alone type of ministry at all. You need a few people to help you. Prepare a simple plan. Get the buy-in from your pastor, such as you have here. He's giving you a thumbs up, so we're good there. Introduce the topic to the parish in some way. There's a number of good things out there. There's Sanctuary for Mental Health Ministries. If any of you have heard of that, it's a wonderful film series. You can go to our webpage. There's a number of ways to introduce the topic. your leg up here in a lot of dioceses. You already have a list of resources in the community that your diocese has available that you can give to people if they're not already in the care. Parish education programs, so I'm here talking tonight and you have other speakers. Special liturgies. One thing in your diocese, Bishop Johnston will be having a liturgy for suicide remembrance and healing this fall, and many dioceses around the country are starting to do that. A very simple liturgy where people who have lost someone to suicide can openly grieve by bringing a flower up. It's a simple rite, and during the middle of the Mass to bring a flower up in remembrance of their loved one, put it in a basket before the altar and perhaps in front of a picture of the Pieta or Our Lady of Guadalupe or some image of some sort of Marian imagery that you can bring up, and just with nice music playing in the background that you do during the Mass. It's a regular Mass. Beyond that, other than of course they preach on suicide, grief, and mental health related issues. But there's all sorts of other liturgies too. May is Mental Health Month. We do what's sometimes called a Blue Christmas or Longest Night Mass on December 21st. December 21st is the longest night of the year. And many of us that deal with mental illness, we're thrilled, obviously, that Jesus Christ came into the world. But we're not so thrilled with is all the glitz and glitter and forced happiness and that comes with Christmas, because a lot of us are grieving and are sad and are struggling with mental health challenges. So this Blue Christmas service recognizes that. A couple of days before Christmas on the 21st, and maybe Taizé music and a series of reflections. It just lets people know that the church understands that not everybody is up for lights and glitter, and that some people need to be consoled at this time of the year. So there's different types of liturgy. Certainly Father can talk about it, the deacons can talk about it from time to time in homilies. The other thing is spiritual support groups, both grief support. You have the suicide support group here for parents that have lost a loved one to suicide, and also support groups for people that live with a mental illness and their caregivers. So we have a couple of them in Scranton. The spiritual support group for people that live with the mental illness is very important for a lot of folks because they get isolated. They don't think anybody understands. They don't have support. So every other Saturday, they come together and just share stories of where they are in their life and where their faith is. It's not clinical support. It's purely like a Bible study almost group. And then for parents, which is a different vibe, so to speak, because the parents usually come to the group when their child just attempted suicide or was just admitted to a psychiatric hospital, and they're generally in crisis and don't know where to turn, don't know where to get support. So we offer this support group to reassure them they're not alone and to share ideas and resources and just pray together as we struggle through that. So these support groups are very helpful, and to just keep in your lane, so to speak, and don't trip over into clinical support. We always encourage, if something comes up, we always encourage them, go talk to your therapist about that. If something comes up with the meds, go talk to your psychiatrist about the meds. We don't try to fix anything. It's all about support. And then home and hospital visits. Just as you visit people with physical illnesses in the home and the hospitals, don't forget the people that are in psychiatric units and that are isolated because of their mental illness. And support other parish ministries. You can sort of be like the in-house expert in mental health issues, where you can support youth groups, prison ministry, any other ministry within the parish. You can be the go-to person to provide that sort of support. So I was saying that we have this online training program, and this is our landing page, I guess, for the training program we have, and we'll be adding other courses, but I know you particularly wanted to know about grief support. So we have a couple courses associated with grief ministry, because grief ministry is very closely related to mental health ministry. Those of us that are attracted to mental health ministry in a lot of ways are attracted to grief support ministry. It's the same idea with the grief support group as a mental health support group. Not going to make the grief go away, but we can help each other, support each other as we work through the grief. Fortunately for most of us that deal with grief, like myself, I mean, my grief's never totally going to go away. I'll always mourn and miss Katie, but it's better now than it was 8 years ago. And I think that's in large part because of the support of my parish community and being able to talk about this. So these grief support groups and mental health groups are, in a large part, very similar in many ways. So I'll show you a couple of, give you some information, a couple trailers on what these programs are like. So we have one training program called Accompany Those Who Mourn, and it's bereavement within the Catholic context. So anybody's welcome to come, but we don't put Mary under a bushel basket. We still pray to the saints
it's Catholic in that sense. Then we openly talk about the sacraments, because the sacraments and the grace that God offers through the sacraments is so important as we go through bereavement. So we talk about that. We talk about, and of course, the central truth of our faith is that death is not the end. There's always the resurrection, and there's always hope. So that's a central part of what it is. We offer some training for parish or Catholic communities to further development of bereavement medicine ministry. The course was developed by Patrick Metz from the Diocese of Atlanta. So we work with the Diocese of Atlanta to update and do this course. I'm guessing, did any of you take the old Diocese of Atlanta Grief course? It was out there online. Okay, but it's a good program, and we've updated it. And it's called what he calls the companioning model, in line with our faith. So we companion or accompany. We're not trying to fix anything in the way of clinical care. And for those of you that are overseeing these things, you go through the course. There's a little knowledge check. I wouldn't call it a test, but a little knowledge check as you're going through it to help guide it. And at the end of the course, you get a little certificate of attendance. So those of you might want to make sure that people took it, they can get a certificate of attendance. So let me, well, you can take it as quickly as you want. I think you could do it in 4 or 5 hours, maybe even less online, because I think the total running time of the films is maybe 2 hours. Yeah, it's not long. It's just enough to get your feet wet. We also recommend a book that you read, a book by Alan Wolfelt on mourning in a company. It's a nice, simple book. It's not an academic thing. So I think between the reading and watching the films, maybe a couple hours to do it. So let me show you the trailer for this so you can get a sense for what it's all about.
Welcome to Accompanying Those Who Mourn, an online bereavement ministry training for clergy and parish leaders. My name is Patrick Metz, and I'm a licensed professional counselor and the Associate Director of the Office of Evangelization and Discipleship at the Archdiocese of Atlanta. Together with the Association of Catholic Mental Health Ministers, we are pleased to bring you this training in an online format. Our goal for this training is to help you, first and foremost, assess your individual parish needs. Oftentimes we think that bereavement care is synonymous with having a bereavement group, but we will see that there are several different ways a parish can effectively support the bereaved in the parish. Secondly, we'd like to suggest a companioning model of bereavement care rather than a clinical model. As Christians, we are called to walk with one another in our sorrow. As you will see, the companioning model fits perfectly with this call, and it was developed and popularized by Dr. Ellen Wolfelt, founder and director of the Center for Loss and Life Transitions. Next, we will discuss bereavement care in the Catholic context. We would like to discuss why it is critically important for the parish to have a bereavement ministry. Furthermore, we would like to help you understand grief and the need to mourn by reading the book, Understanding Your Grief, 10 Essential Touchstones for Finding Hope and Healing Your Heart. Lastly, we will help you begin the process of assessing and planning for your parish needs. The training will be broken into sections, and each section of the training contains a few separate components. First, there will be a video introduction and presentation of the theme or objective of the section. Second, there will be some required reading from a book or a downloadable document. And lastly, possible links to additional resources that may be helpful. In addition to the sections I just mentioned, I have added some additional modules that you may find helpful and beneficial for your work in the parish. The first is a brief talk given by Dr. Leonard D. Lorenzo of the McGrath Institute for Church Life at the University of Notre Dame. Dr. D. Lorenzo will be discussing his book, Our Faithful Departed, Where They Are and Why It Matters. and how through the pain of loss of our loved ones, we encounter Christ and communion with Him and our loved ones. The second additional module is offered to present to you some information that may be helpful for you in your care and support of individuals who are caretakers, family members, or loved ones who grieve those with dementia. While this specific area may just be one among many areas of grief that you will encounter in your care and support of those who grieve, the grief that surrounds a loss of a loved one with a neurodegenerative disorder can be complicated and would benefit from additional time and attention. We thank you for your willingness to serve the bereaved in your community, and we hope and pray that this training can assist you in your formation of a bereavement ministry at your parish.
So that's Patrick Metz's. You took it, Steve. How long did it take you to go through the films? What's your guess? I know you did all 10 instead of 8. About the same as what I estimated? Okay. What's that? About 5 hours. Okay, so it's a little bit of a commitment, but it's not like taking a 3-credit college course where you have to spend 40, 50 hours on it. But it is a little bit of, and you can take it at your own pace. You don't have to take it. Steve, you said you blew through it all in one day, which you could do if you want to, but you can also take it in smaller chunks. So I would encourage you to think about taking the course. The other course we have on grief is related to the books that Bishop Dolan and I edited for suicide grief. I don't know where the books went, but anyhow, we offered 2 books. One on for pastoral leaders, which goes into in-depth a little bit on the church teaching on suicide historically, and most importantly, the relatively recent changes in the catechism. I know some of you look to be about my age, and you probably remember the bad old days, so to speak, where if someone died by suicide, they couldn't get a Catholic Mass, they couldn't be buried in a Catholic cemetery. That's no longer church practice. When my Katie died, we had a beautiful Mass attended by the bishop and all the rest of that, and Katie's buried in our Catholic cemetery. But there's still a residual misunderstanding and even a residual grief for people who lost, say, a parent or a grandparent back in the 70s and 80s, even back in the 1960s, where it was such a shame if someone in your family died by suicide, you just buried it under the table, and some people kind of just forgot about them and never talked again. And as we all know, you can't handle grief that way. It bubbles back up at some point. So having this resource is important and available and explains the church teaching. And we also have a smaller book called Comfort, Hope, and Healing for Grieving Catholics. And it's 9 chapters where we have a series of prayers. We have Catholic leaders, I guess, so to speak. Bishop Dolan reflects on his experience. I reflect on my experience. Monsignor Charles Pope, some people kind of know who he is. He's a pretty prolific writer. He lost his sister to suicide. So we have 9 chapters, and when you're grieving, you can only take things in small doses. And at the end of each chapter, we have prayers to the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and Mary. So all you good Catholics here, do you know why it's 9 chapters? Yeah, it's a novena. You can pray it as a novena, right. You can take it, like I said, you can only take these things in small bites. So we have the books, but I know not everybody likes to read books, and they're simple books to read. They're not written in very, highbrow language. But we've also created a series of films that you can use for support groups for people that have lost someone to suicide. Again, they're free on our website. We have a facilitator's guide, a participant's guide, and you can see there we only have 8 films, not all 9 chapters and films. But each film is about half hour or so, 20 minutes, and you can watch the film together and then process it and use it as a way to facilitate your grief support group after suicide. So we got trailers and everything. So let me show you the trailer for this program.
Fran and I had twins. They were born in 1976, boy and a girl, Kevin and Carla. Carla was beautiful, literally beautiful, brilliant, creative, but she had died. And that's what launched us into suicide grief.
The day he died, he was talking to me, but I knew his energy was weird.
And he said, "I love you, Mom." And that was the last thing I ever heard him say.
I lost my husband, Connor, to suicide 25 years ago, and it has shaped my life in the most profound way.
Katie lived a good life. She lived 11 years with this bipolar disorder. 3 hours after we found she died, I wrote her obituary. And it was a short, simple obituary that said, Katie had bipolar disorder, but she was a wonderful child of God, and she's not defined by bipolar disorder.
I came to understand that Marianne, my sister, had died by suicide. And when it comes to suicide, we sometimes think of it in the abstract. We must be very careful to remember there's a person and a story, and this is very precious to God.
I was really suffering in the aftermath because I really didn't understand why God would allow this to happen to Connor, would allow it to happen to me.
If I listen really well, instead of letting the anger rage in my head and my heart, I can hear God say, "I was there and it was horrible. I loved him too."
There is a special kind of suffering that comes with suicide loss that actually the church can minister to by allowing us to know and to be reminded that Christ is always with us.
And Jesus knows all about our troubles. He knows them. He experienced them. Every sorrow, every pain, every grief that would ever be experienced by all of humanity, he experienced on that cross.
Suicide and death, as Christians, we know that death is not the end. Death by suicide is not the end. There's always the resurrection and salvation, and there's always hope. And that's the one thing that's come out of this belief that God can overcome everything.
I don't have all the answers, even though I've studied this for almost 4 decades. But I do know that within the wretchedness and the pain that comes with suicide, there's the potential to live your life differently because you knew this person, they were a part of your life, and you'll never forget them.
We remember her for her courage, because whatever her struggles, she fought.
Carla's version of the Serenity Prayer, it is our prayer, written by Carla shortly before she died. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Show me the trace of you in everyone I know. Gently turn my gaze back home toward simplicity, grace, and gratitude. Remind me that we are all imperfect, holy, and free. Open me to know and embrace your peace. Amen.
So as you can see, it's a well done. We work with a group called Sanctuary Mental Health Ministries, who's located in Vancouver, and they have this real niche ministry. They do film production based on the intersection of faith and mental health, and they do a beautiful job with their films. So take a look at it, and like I said, those are the books that, and I'd happy to say the books got the Catholic Publishers Association Resources of the Year awards back when they were published. So it's good to see that they recognize the importance of this. Not that our books are like Pulitzer Prize winning books, but I think they recognize the importance of having books out there like this. So I'll just end with the Pope. So all Catholics like to hear me talk about the Pope a little bit. So I've had 2 kind of encounters with the Pope, or at least with the Vatican, in very odd ways. At least struck me as odd. So one story is that back in November of 21, the Pope, as you might know, has a monthly day of prayer but for centuries now. He prays on a different topic every month, and it's entrusted to the Jesuits to take care of this particular ministry. So in November of 2021, it was the first time anyone knew of it that he actually was praying for a mental health related topic. He was praying for depression. So one morning that my wife and I are sitting at our kitchen table in Scranton, and I get a text on the phone, and I'm sure Father gets these. I'm sure many of you get these. Please call me right away. I need some help. I'm in a meeting. I don't know. Do you get those kind of emails? I get them. They're spam emails. So and this one morning I get this email that says, "Call me right away. This is Andrea from the Vatican." I'm thinking, well, that's that's a new angle, you know. Call me, I'm from the Vatican. And I was about to delete it, and Ruth said, no, why don't you just see what's going on here? That is kind of different. So I wrote back and I said, okay, Andrea, what is it you would like? And it would turn out it actually was Andrea Cerubi, who I've since got to know, a very nice man from the Vatican, looking for help on putting together their monthly prayer intention in November of 21 for people that live with depression. So I'm thinking, well, this is wonderful. Of course, I'm thrilled. I'd be very happy to work with the Vatican on this and help grow the ministry and all the rest of that. But then the other hand, I'm thinking, really, this is the best you got is a deacon in Scranton, Pennsylvania? But it was. I mean, obviously they can find psychiatrists and psychologists to help them on this, but what they were looking for was someone in a pastoral ministry. And at the time, we were about the only game out there with some sort of deliberate, thought-through pastoral ministry. I would think now they would call maybe one of you people in this room and ask for some help. But at that time, a couple years ago, we were the only game in town. They checked us out, checked me out, and vetted me and all the rest of that. So we did a series of this one film, and I'll show you that in a minute. I'll let the Pope have the last word. And then just in January, I met the Pope. We were planning to have some meetings in Rome on some, they'll just leave it at some bureaucratic sort of organizational issues with different dicasteries in Rome on this topic. And Father Fornos, who runs the beautiful man who runs the Pope's Prayer Network, said, do you want to meet the Pope? And I thought, well, okay, sure, I'd like to meet the Pope. And we just happened to be in Rome at the time, and they were having a small audience with the Pope on the people that work with the prayer network. And so I was invited over to this. We continue now to work with the Pope's Prayer Network, and every month there is a prayer around the Pope's monthly prayer. So we'll take a mental health angle on the Pope's prayer. So if the Pope's praying for teachers, we pray for the mental health of teachers and their students. For example, this month, the Pope was praying for martyrs, new martyrs in the church. And I was thinking, how am I going to draw a connection between martyrdom in the church and mental health? And as it turned out, I did more research. I found that quite a few martyrs lived with mental illness. St. Oscar Romero, some of you may be familiar with, he was modern diagnosis of obsessive compulsive disorder. Blessed Grande is a Jesuit that worked in El Salvador around the same time. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia. So these were two modern mental health diagnoses. A Chinese saint who was martyred in the early 19th century was addicted for 30 years. He went to his martyrdom professing Christ, but the parish would not let him take communion for 30 years because of his addiction. They thought it was sinful. But nevertheless, he loved Christ, and he knew Christ loved him, and he was brought to the glory through martyrdom. And I can go on and on about the saints. I've kind of made it a little side specialty to study the saints and their mental health. And it's, believe me, mental health is not an impediment to holiness. God works through everything, and God can certainly overcome mental health. So it was wonderful to go meet the Pope. He's everything you would think. He's this friendly, moderate height Italian gentleman, and very friendly. We were sitting in the room. He kept us waiting for an hour and a half, but he's a busy guy. I said, doesn't the Pope have a schedule? To the fellow, and he goes, oh yeah, he has a schedule. He just doesn't pay much attention to it. So this 87-year-old man is running an hour and a half behind every day. He came in, walked in with an orthopedic cane, no big fancy papal cane, no big, the Swiss Guard didn't come in and say, all stand for the Pope. He just, a room, I don't know, smaller than this, but a pretty small room. He just walked in the back door, and we looked around, oh, there's the Pope, and buongiorno, and he came up and said hello. I got my picture taken with him. I gave him the book on mental health ministry, and, I'm allowed to use that to promote the ministry, and the Pope's well aware of this ministry. He has, we don't have any, I'm not going to pretend we have some sort of official recognition, but certainly support and commendation, I guess would be the right word. So it's nice to see that, even up at the highest levels of the church, they understand the importance and need for this ministry. And like I said earlier, the Pope certainly understands it on a personal level even. So let me give the last word I'll give to the Pope. I'll show you the 2-minute film that they put together in the month of November 21 for depression. And I think I'm obviously very biased, but I think it's a great little film.
La sobrecarga de trabajo, el estrés laboral, hacen que muchas personas experimenten un agotamiento extremo. un agotamiento mental, emocional, afectivo y físico. De ahí la tristeza, la apatía, el cansancio espiritual terminan por dominar la vida de las personas que se ven desbordados por el ritmo de la vida actual. Procuremos estar cerca de los que están agotados, de los que están desesperados, sin esperanza. Muchas veces escuchando simplemente en silencio, porque no podemos ir a decirle a una persona, no, la vida no es así, escúchame, yo te doy la receta. No hay receta. Y además, no olvidemos que junto al imprescindible acompañamiento psicológico, útil y eficaz, las palabras de Jesús también les ayudan. Me viene a la mente y al corazón, venid a mí, todos los que estáis fatigados y sobrecargados, y yo os daré descanso. Recemos para que las personas que sufren de depresión o agotamiento extremo reciban apoyo de todos y reciban una luz que les abra a la vida.
So I think that's a nice way to end it. The Pope, I like his closing statement, and that's what mental health ministry is all about, really, at its essence, is offering people light that opens them up to life. So thank you for listening to me. We still got a few minutes left. Do you want to say something, Father? Yes.
Quick commercial announcement. Every month on our Facebook page, we post the Pope's prayer intention.
The mental health intention or the Pope's prayer intention? Yeah, okay, we have a mental health, we have a little thing for the mental health too. So we got 15, 20 minutes left or so. Does anybody else want to say something or have a comment? Yeah. I'll be the MC, pass the mic around.
I just have a question, and I wonder if other people share the same concern. And I'm from St. Peter's Parish in Kansas City, Missouri. I'm interested in the concept of the mental health ministry and participating in one, but I would be very, very nervous as the leader of such a ministry or the convener or whatever the right word is about saying the wrong thing, because I'm not a mental health professional and I could take your training and would be interested in that. But how do you keep that line between what this kind of ministry can offer, and you've said it many times, if you need help, call your doctor, call your therapist, your medication needs there, but I would just be very concerned about, particularly somebody that was in a crisis. I don't know, just how do you keep that line clear?
Of course, everyone's worried about that, having the confidence to offer this ministry. Well, one, you're not a mental health professional. The other wonderful course out there to take is mental health first aid. I'm sure some of you have taken that. Mental health first aid is kind of what it sounds like, which is first aid only for a mental health crisis rather than a physical crisis. And it's how to, when someone's in crisis, how to talk to them and get them to the professional care, but you're not the one that's trying to prevent the suicide or manage the psychotic episode of psychosis, which is very rare. I mean, it's very rare. And then also gives you ideas on how to identify emerging and worsening symptoms and get them to the professional care. So, yeah, I think as long as you keep that in mind, I am not the professional. I'm here to talk to you about your spiritual life. I'm here to provide support. You'll see if you'll get into it. You'll see where that line is. And most people that have come to this ministry already are in therapy and counseling. They just don't. We just don't tell each other we're in therapy or counseling. The people that are not in therapy or counseling don't recognize they need the help. Either some people are severely ill. You hear this with anosognosia. That's just a term for people who have no insight into their illness. They'll never come to the ministry because they don't think they're ill. And then people that are just emerging with it. Do you got something you want to say? You're whispering in front of me, so I got to ask. You know someone with that doesn't. Without insight, that's a real thing. I can talk about it. They're not in denial. I mean, it's there's a medical term for that, anosognosia. Yeah, there's a great book out there. I keep it in my office back in Scranton. I pass it on almost like bubble gum. The book is titled "I'm Not Sick, I Don't Need Help," because I have so many parents and brothers and sisters that come. There's a doctor named Dr. Xavier Amadar. He specializes in this of trying to talk to people that have no insight into their mental illness. The anosognosia, it's the closest thing would be like if you've heard these stories of someone loses an arm, they still think the arm's there. Well, it's the same sort of thing. The person's mind goes, but they're sort of back pre-mental illness, and they truly think, they are not in denial, they truly think all the rest of us are out to get them. What if I was sitting there telling you, you have to take this potion of pills, and you don't think you're sick, or that you have to take chemotherapy, and you don't think you have cancer? Of course you're going to think people are out to get you, and you know, act out in various different ways that make no sense, but they truly don't think they're sick. So there are ways to talk to people like that, but I would say, you have Jesus, you love people with mental health, take a little bit of training and some literacy to give you the confidence to do this. You're going to say dumb things? Yeah, we all say dumb things. But as long as you don't try to do diagnosis, or as long as you don't try to prescribe meds or try to usurp their therapist, you'll be fine. And I've talked to the insurance companies that cover dioceses. They all say the same thing. If you stay in your lane, if you stay pastoral ministry, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. Yeah, many dioceses have lawyers, believe it or not. And they ask this question, so I've been down this road many times, this issue of liability and concern, and yeah, they all say the same thing. And like I said earlier, it's not like the church has just started interacting with people with mental illness. I mean, we've been doing it for 2,000 years. It's just maybe we haven't been doing a really good job about it, so maybe we can step up our game a little bit and be more deliberate and more thoughtful about what we're doing. If anything, we should be, well, I should be careful what I say because I'm on camera here, but back in the past, some of the things we did was outright harmful. We ignored them, we wouldn't give them funerals, we did things that was very damaging, and no one worried about that. So now we try to handle it in a more deliberate, more compassionate way. Anybody else got anything?
I think for me, accompaniment would probably work out really. I think I can adjust really well with that. Yes, I have a counseling background, but even there, I couldn't cross lines. You were there just to work with your client, work with the student. You weren't there to diagnose. You were there to listen. So it's similar to accompaniment. So when I meet a person that comes to me, I'm not going to look for a problem. I'm going to listen to the person and have that person build trust in me, and we'll walk through, maybe make whatever that person needs on a spiritual level. But no, it'll be easier than you think, as long as you know you're not treatment and you're not labeling a person. You're looking at the person as a person.
Right. This ministry is not here to fix anything. To be honest with you, we might not ever prevent a suicide. We might not ever help anybody get better mental health care. Our hope is that we'll help people know they're loved by Christ in the midst of all of this, and that the church is with them. And like the Pope said in the video, sometimes there are no solutions. And we just have to accept that sometimes there's no solutions. Just sit there in silence with the person as we deal with that, and just have to accept that's life at times. Anybody else want to say anything or comment? Well, sure. Thank you.
So Deacon Ed has been in our diocese doing different things around town since last Tuesday. Yeah, and he had a rather eventful flight getting here. So again, it's out of our control, but just the same. We're glad you're here. Your week has been fruitful in many ways that you'll never know, that we'll never know. So we appreciate you being here. So there is a real short evaluation form on the tables. If you'd complete one, we'd appreciate it just for your feedback. The last question is if you have any other comments or questions. So that one is an open ask if there's anything different or whatever else you'd like to know. So I do want to give a shout out to Father Joe and Father Randy here at St. Therese. They have been consistently helpful in getting this ministry going and helping with resources and everything else. So we appreciate that. I'd also like to introduce you to the 3 co-leads here at St. Therese. So Jeff Davis is back running the streaming. So there he is in the back. And then Diane Hall is here. Wave your hand. And then I'm Mary Beth Fisher. So we've just formally been doing this, growing this since last April. So again, we're still growing, and we're connecting with other parishes within the diocese as well through the mental health ministry. And we appreciate you being here. So thank you, and have a, Well, it's funny you mentioned that, and I know I'm getting off screen, so okay. So we actually have Josh in Emporia right now. That's who we're live streaming this to. So it's beginning. Yeah, so. Yeah. Okay, so.
The deacon and his wife are both psychologists. Do you know? Can you remember? Help me with the name? Okay, I know. Yeah, I know. It'll both come to us in a minute. But anyhow, Josh is getting help. What's that? Moffat. Yeah, the Moffats are going to be helping Josh with this ministry. They're coming on board shortly, and they, of course, understand this, and so that'll be great. Yeah.
So thank you for coming from Kansas. I mean, of course, we welcome all.